I wouldn't recommend super glue because the problem with super glue, it tends to wick into the wood so much that you really don't get a particularly good glue joint with it. However, if you're willing to wait a few more minutes and use super glue to sort of penetrate around the outside of the key, let it dry, then take your chances that you can reunite the key with a new little bit of super glue, then the key would hold. I have tested that before.
Soak in enough.
Right, because the super glue, especially if you use the thinnest viscosity, will be absorbed by the wood. It's rare for wood not to be able to absorb it. Grand keys are usually a little more dense, and so they don't absorb the thin cyanoacrylate as easily, but it will work. Instead, I would recommend 5-minute epoxy. The best brand, I think, that's available of the 5-minute epoxies is available through Piano Tech. It's the GS, the West System epoxies. If you get a fairly close approximation to 50-50, mix it up, it will glue pretty well. Part of the problem with re-gluing keys is that, as you can see here, I've just lightly pressed the key together back in the spot, and you get this wacko big hole there that's very oval and not very easily rejoined. Another problem that you'll have in gluing a key, you can get everything pressed in there real good if you're careful and can get it there, and then find that what you end up with is a key that's sort of like this after it's glued in place, that it didn't get glued correctly. I use parchment paper. Before it sets up, set the adjoining key next to it. Most of the time, not all the time, if there's no shoe on the bottom of that's what would be the equivalent of the key button, but it's on the bottom. If there's no shoe on it, it normally is flat. And so you can just set it on a table and you won't end up with a key that is like this. If you're trying to reuse all this stuff, the more of these splinter pieces that you can get out of there, even by picking them up out with tweezers or anything else, you don't, with 5-minute epoxy, you don't need to have 100% contact. As a matter of fact, if you just broke a bunch of this stuff away, and then you might find that you can get a little better fit. Even just lightly doing that, now I've gotten the key button back in place again. Before, I didn't get a chance to show you that, but just pressing the key together, it really wasn't in place, and I didn't have a round hole. And that's important on the bottom unless you're going to use another tool that I have in my arsenal to make a new hole for that. Okay, so that's one thing you can do about a broken key.
So you use the side keys as a frame for the
yes,
paper?
But one of the also things, and I've had pianos before that you can have a lot of broken keys. I have had musicians before that, especially in clubs and the like, especially if they're using an older piano, but it can be cheap wood, Korean, that you'll have a lot of broken keys simply because they play so hard. And so oftentimes you're going to need to reinforce the key. So even if you use 5-minute epoxy to actually do the gluing, I would suggest, and I didn't bring any super glue, that you paint super glue on the outside edges of it to reinforce and make the fibers of the wood hard again, so that you don't have that tendency to break. Something else that works very well is to cut a piece of the veneer, and especially on uprights, there's usually quite a wide space between the keys that you can get a normal thickness of veneer and glue it on. Again, for that I would use a good either the 5-minute epoxy or Elmer's or Type Bond.
Kind of like
Type
a
Bond
race or something.
Right, yeah, and you'll put it in the direction that the grain is going this way to reinforce the key. You only need to go on either side of the break about an inch. because most of your tension when you're trying to push on a key because of the mortise in the hole is right there in the center. And so in this case,
This one is done.
that's good. I would have gone a little farther out from the break on it, but excellent repair.
And look at the
And it's gone-
extra little piece on there.
Yeah, this side is a little better. That, did you put the shoe in?
I didn't do that.
The insert? Okay. This key was probably already made with the insert at the base. Not an extra shoe, but they've put that piece in. And it's very unusual to find a key that breaks, that's had that reinforcement on the bottom. As you can see with these older upright keys, nothing like that. And so they're relatively easy to break. One other thing I've done over the years, there used to be a type of webbing. It felt just like cloth. It was just as loose and floppy as cloth. But if you painted the side of the key with this cloth, if you, like on a grand where you don't have a lot of room between the keys, this cloth was quite thin, but it was, it looked like webbing, fiberglass. And you slap that on with the 5-minute glue, the 5-minute epoxy, and put that down. And I literally, you cannot break a key
Feels so
even if you
stiff.
hit it because it has stiffened up. I mean, I guess you could, but just doing that, you won't even hear a crack. So you can reinforce keys, especially on doing a whole set. Now this is a grand key. Sometimes there's not enough room to put that. Depends. The older keys will have more room than newer keys. Okay.
I have cut a little depth in there and put the splice on.
Okay.
I haven't done that in years, but countersink it. That's what I'm doing.